It was the bill that what is it? If kids run away from home because they deemed California a
The trans
sanctuary
sanctuary.
state, trained
Yes.
sanctuary state. So if kids run away, a court order from another state, California, won't abide by, which to me violates the federal constitution, privileges and immunities of other states. I mean,
Illegal
the fact.
kidnapping.
So it's insane that California just goes, we're not going to listen to what other states have to say in terms of family custody. That
Right.
kind of sounds like it, where the government just kind of steps in and goes, nope, we're going to take control of your child. There's nothing you can do. That's basically it. And the state has more authority over. It's almost like at this point, the state of California is almost in a position where their position is, we're granting you permission to have children and to raise them,
Right.
but we have the ultimate say, and at the end of the day, we can pull your kids away and we can put them in these residential shelters. At the end of the day, they're our children, so you enjoy the privilege of having these kids from the state. So does that sound correct?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually heard them say, I mean, we've heard even Joe Biden say, like, these children are not your children. These children are our children. They're not your children. They're not your children. And people confuse this. Actually, it's really interesting. When I was at Mass this weekend, the priest was talking about how, like, children, he's from Ghana, our priest is from Ghana. And he was saying that, like, when the children would run around the village, that, like, if you did something naughty, like, your auntie would spank you or ground you or, put you on timeout or whatever it was. And he's like, oh, our children, the children were the children of the village. And I do believe that it takes a village to raise a child, and that's your community. That's your extended,
Mm-hmm.
your nuclear family, your extended family, your aunties, your uncles, your neighbors, certainly. But those people are not the state. Those aren't the government. Children are not, and people, I think the reason why I point that out is because I think people have confused that. It takes a village of us, of individuals, of citizens to raise a child. But unless we are elected into office, we are not the state. The government
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to, and you already know that, it is supposed to be a small government of finite, limited, enumerated powers. And that's why I kind of started this podcast with saying, the government is, these government agencies and these boards are from the law, instrumentalities of our creation. We created them. We don't even give them our power. It's almost like proxy. It's like voting by proxy. Like, we can't all 32 million or however many millions of us Californians go to the Capitol and vote on laws. We give them the authority to vote on, that there's 32 million of us and we cannot all go to the Capitol and legislate and lobby for these bills. We have elected representatives to serve us in the public capacity. And so, that's exactly what's happening. It's similar. I mean, what's going on in California is even worse, because we know that Governor Newsom is gunning for presidency. He's saying he's not going for 2024, but 2028. So what happens in California will spread across the country. And he has already demonstrated time and again, like you mentioned last year, he does not care about the California Constitution. He does not care about the U.S. Constitution, the federal Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. And he will just run amok. He will run ramshackle over that. He does not care about any of these constitutional provisions, even though he has taken an oath to uphold the state, federal Constitution, and the law. So it's pretty terrifying. He does not care. California does not care.
I want to expand on just a couple things, because there are already provisions in place with this law, but this is now, the child doesn't have to present any sign of harm, correct? Like, correct. It could just be any child, whereas before they were possibly suicidal, or there was harm going on in the home, some sort of abuse. And now that they're trying to erase all that. It's just any child, they can decide to do this. And this is so bizarre to me, because the state of California has, I believe, about 60,000 children in foster care right now. Where do they expect all these children, when they make them wards of the state, where do they expect them to go? And we're already hearing it. Yeah. Many people are wonderful foster parents. I'm not putting that down, but we do hear horrific stories of, these teenagers that go through abuse in these foster homes, and then they're often the turnarounds of the homes because they're kicked out of one home and into another. And
right.
I just, as a parent, am always baffled, absolutely baffled, that they're trying to separate children from parents. But then I'm glad you mentioned mass, because I wasn't sure where you were with your faith and everything. But the Bible, I feel like Democrats are trying so hard to take the Bible and then just make everything about it opposite and illegal. You know, the Bible's so clear about parents training your child in the way that they should go. There's all these verses. And in fact, there's entire chapters dedicated to parenting and raising your children. And then Democrats are like, nope, nope, nope. And if you do any of that, we're going to take them away from you.
Well, I mean, and then they just lie. Like Governor Newsom is like, we have the strongest protections for local control. We are the freest state with the freest, free speech protections and rights. And yet we passed last year AB 2098, which silenced doctors and medical professionals who were, spreading information that ran contrary to the then, at that moment, current COVID-19 narrative. That is, he literally suppressed free speech. That was to silence people from speaking and communicating. AB 665, AB 957, for example, is another horrifying bill that says you must affirm your child. And if you don't affirm your child, you could lose custody of your child. It says that judges must give priority to those. And this is in effect. This is not what the bill says, but we've already seen this happening, is that judges are giving priority, or favoring, I should say, parents who affirm their child's self-selected gender identity, whatever that identity is, whatever age that child is. If you are religious and your religion prohibits you, or doesn't believe in the transgender ideology, and your religion prohibits you from doing that, that is a violation of your First Amendment right to free exercise of religion. It violates your First Amendment right to free speech, to speak freely, say, I don't agree with this. It's actually compelled speech. If you do say, yes, I affirm my child, even though you don't affirm your child, you wouldn't ordinarily do that. So, I mean, these are horrifyingly egregious bills. They completely run afoul of, again, even the California Constitution, and certainly the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. And these protections are well settled. Okay. These are fundamental rights that are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. They have been protected. Parental rights, your right to privacy, has been protected for over 100 years by the U.S. Supreme Court over and over again.
Poor Camille is outnumbered by 2 Catholics on this podcast.
I'm a Christian. It's okay.
Well, I hear enough people who say Catholics aren't Christian.
No, we just like to
it's a denomination. Sorry, we're not going to get on a rant on that. I feel like we all probably pretty much believe the same. It's fine.
I mean, we're the original Christianity, but that's not the point of this podcast. Anyway, moving on, in terms of another bill I wanted to touch upon was AB 1078. And this has really become like a hot button issue because of what's going on. If you've been paying attention, like school board districts, and Orange Unified just passed this same parental notification. Jonathan Zackerson, who's been on the show before, has been a big part of this, in terms of getting these parental notification policies where they were trying to say if some child or student comes to a teacher and comes out as transgender, that the teacher's position was they wanted to keep it secret, but now they have this parental notification. So this sort of goes hand in hand with that.
And yet opposite.
What's that?
Because on the one hand, opposite, because on the one hand, they're saying if you don't affirm your child, we're going to take them away from you. Exactly. But then on the other hand, they're saying we need to keep this from the parents because they're in a dangerous situation. So we either can't or can't affirm them because we're not. I'm sorry.
Right. So you must affirm, but we're not going to tell you. And you don't get to know. Right. So, so I've put these bills for this year really are like in 2 camps, but they all go together. And I would like to say, for the record, a lot of these bills are trans-oriented, transgender, gender-affirming care-oriented bills. This is not about transgender children. Okay. Right. Last year was not about COVID. Every single year, what I have kind of, the analogy that I have come up with or whatever conveyed is each year they pick a hot button topic, and that is the Trojan horse. So when George Floyd died, it was, systemic racism and racial disparities and Black Lives Matter, and that was the Trojan horse that they tried to usher in all of these horrible bills. At the end of the day, we're trying to strip us of our fundamental constitutionally protected rights. Okay.
Mhm.
Last year, or over 2 years, was COVID. And with the COVID Trojan horse, they were trying to usher in, like, for example, SB 866 by Senator Scott Wiener was to empower minors to not just the COVID-19 vaccine, but to consent as young as 12 to all vaccines, right? Because there were Trump, MAGA, QAnon, literally, he was like, there are QAnon conspiracy parents who don't believe in vaccines. There are crazy anti-vaxxers, and these children do not deserve to suffer and die from COVID because their parents are reading misinformation and they're misinformed QAnon conspiracy theorists. Literally, that is what he said. And he said it was about COVID-19 vaccines, but when you read the bill, it was about all vaccines. So then we would have had children as young as 12 in the state of California. If people do not know, you need to wake up. Your child as young as 12 has medical privacy and the right to consent to mental health treatment, substance abuse rehabilitative treatment, sexual reproductive health, including abortions. There's a slew of medical treatment and care that your child as young as 12 can already consent to. So he wanted to do substance abuse, sexual reproductive health, mental health services. And he would say, if your child can already get an abortion, why can't they just get a vaccine? It's just one shot. They can get this whole, procedure done without you knowing, like, why not? And that's what's called a slippery slope in the law, Phil, you know that. So they were just building and building and building. And we have allowed this to happen because what they do is they take one horrifying, like you were mentioning, but Camille, one horrifying case. Of course, there is that one horrifying case of the 10-year-old who got raped by her father, who couldn't talk to anybody about it, but wanted to get an abortion or just reproductive health care and couldn't. And she was 10 or 12 or whatever the age was. And so we create a law around that one horrifying exception to the rule. And we've allowed consistently in California to allow these horrifying exceptions to swallow the rule. So now, again, in California, minors as young as 12 can consent to, again, I just really want people to understand sexual reproductive health care, mental health care, substance abuse treatment. And he wanted to add vaccines. We were lucky enough to kill that because this year it's the trans Trojan horse. And I know I would bet my, FLTJ that if last year he would have passed vaccines, he would have been like, they can already get abortions, they can already get vaccines. Why not allow them consent to gender affirming care? It would have been the next thing. So right now, this year is the trans Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse covered in the rainbow flag. No one wants to touch it because it's the hot button topic. All of these bills start with, analysis of trans LGBTQ youth, how they're susceptible, to mental health issues, to suicidality, and then they're like, and that's why we need to increase the gas tax. Right. It's like, it has nothing to do with